There you go.
Okay, we're doing Siman Lam and Gimel. And we're basically the question about, based on our Mishnah, the first Mishnah in Kedushin, which says there's three ways to affect a Kedushin, to affect betrothal. And now we're coming to one that at some level seems the most essential, but on the other hand seems hard to get a kind of a hands around it, and that is by Bia. So our questions that we're going to have will be, first of all, what do we mean, or what is meant by Bia? And in order to affect Kiddushin. And with that, and that will be one part of that general question, the different forms of Bia. And the second, area will be the impact of Bia. Once we know what Bia is, the impact of Bia. Now, you can separate these questions, but as you can tell from how I sent you originally all these Makorots, they really weren't, they feed upon each other. But I think now, and I will tell you where I'm headed, and we'll work this out together. I want to start with Kiddushin Yud Amud Aleph. I don't know how you're finding it, but here on this page, I'm going to be looking towards the Gemara, Rashi, and the Tosfot of Kol HaBoil Datal Gemar Bia. And I'm anxious to start and make some headway. And so what I'll be asking will be, I'm going to start reading for a while. I'm going to be asking in terms of, so what are we learning from this particular section? That'll be the general question, including then there's some repetitive material. When we hit the repetitive material, is there anything new in the repetitive material? So, somewhat 10 lines down in the Vilna edition, Yud Amud Aleph Boilahu. Okay. Techilat Diakona Osok Diakona. And my question learning this, I first learned this when I was 7 with my Zeta. And he, what can I say? He wasn't completely forthcoming. Okay. So, but even now I look at it. So what the hell does Techilas Bia mean? And what's Sof Bia? That's going to be the issues that have to be dealt with. Not kamina to go sheheraba pasha yada the kibla kiddushin. Now the impact of it is that situation. The kibla kiddushin after. Two possible impacts. Okay, Yavni, tell me the first impact, depending upon when we say Bia begins. Not that I know what Techilat Bia is, or not that I know what Sof Bia is.
The first nafkamina is if after the Tchilat Bia, but before the Sof Bia, she takes Kiddushin from someone else.
Yeah, that was a startling, I'll leave my background, a startling image for I was closer to a startling image for a in-city suburban child of how that takes place.
Even for an adult, this sounds like an R-17 rated rom-com.
But having not ever been to one, I'll take your word for it. I don't even know what it means. Okay. Inami, because actually, let's actually talk about, and I'm done with the joke. Let's talk about, so I want you kind of like explain it to you even better. what is it pointing, what's it pointing out? In terms of the question of Techilat Bia or Sof Bia.
I don't understand your question.
In other words, well, I'm kind of trying to understand more. What creates the problem?
That an ambiguity about when the kiddushin actually takes effect.
Okay. All right. Anybody else want to make a point on this? We'll come back to it. Yes, Joel.
I think the idea is that there can be an act of sex or maybe intercourse, whatever you want to call it, that doesn't affect via kiddushin bia b'kiddushin, and therefore, they could do this and nothing has happened in terms of the status hasn't been changed.
Right. Right. Yes. It is so unchanged that Pashta Yada, she can put her hand through the window, as my grandfather said to me. Pashta Yada, the hand through the window, and someone puts the money or shavakesa, and she accepts it. That the act that she's undergoing with the sexual act is rendered. It's not rendered. It is meaningless, unless it's techilas bia. But if bia only works when it's self bia, then that act is rendered meaningless. Or inami. Yeah, go.
It might sound like an odd question, but while they're partaking in like the sexual activity, wouldn't that be considered medabrim alaske kiddushim to a certain extent?
Could be considered what?
Medabrim alaske kiddushim, like they're in the middle of talking about it. Even if someone else would come along and ask her, like it's not so clear cut that she would mikudeshet through that.
Yeah, well, so evidently I'll take that as a shita, and this is that shita is rejected by this Gemara. This Gemara says it's not a rational. You need at least some sort of rational understanding, and there's not a time for reason during the act itself. And I think actually it's a good question, and my answer is not such a bad answer as you might think. It's not such a bad answer, because what it's saying is that this is the rabbis are controlling bia. Bia has to mean something. Bia has to have a impact, and it is not based. It's not as self-evident as one would think. I'm yelling it because I'm trying to convince myself, but I think it's like that. It's not self-evident unless it's evident. Okay, now.
Rav Landes,
Okay, Asher, quick.
Quick question. Does this sort of contradict what Beit Hillel is saying, what we were reading in Gittin, that does this sort of turn this into a Bi'ilat Znut, which Beit Hillel says people just don't do that. But if she's having relations with one person, reaches out her hand and accepts a Shaveh Pruta from somebody else, that means what she's doing with this first guy is basically a Bi'ilat Znut.
Okay.
I mean, it says an adam was bilat znut. You could read the sentence as very gendered. A man doesn't do bilat znut. However, like some women might. And I'm just saying, like that's
well, I think we're.
But like, and it might not be valid at all. I'm just saying you could read it gender, and that would answer your question.
And I think ish is usually more used for man, and adam is like people. That's my understanding. I could be off.
Well, let's leave it at that. My quick response there is. Okay, so maybe one of the desired goals is to find out when does an act. I can't repeat my words. When does an act become meaningful? Now they don't call it. That's you. This Piatzanut stuff is you. It's not anybody else. But the question is when does it become meaningful? And it's going to come back. It's going to come back. That even for those who say Gemar Bia, or as it's, what happens if the individual, and we haven't defined Gemar Bia, but if the man stopped Mitterin, in the middle, he stops in the middle. Does that act then, that he's Poresh, does that act become meaningful? That he's, in the fact that he's Poresh. So there's a seeking of finding that meaningfulness. So therefore, that's a good question. Inami L'Kohen Gadol, and since I'm dealing with you, Yavni, read the Rashi Kohen Gadol.
Just finding the Rashi.
1, 2.
אינמי לכהן גדול, אם מותר לקדש בביאה, היא אמרת תחילת ביאה קונה, מותר, ואם סוף ביאה קונה נמצאת בעולה משעת הערה שלא לשם קידושין, ואסירה לי, דכתיב בתולה מהמאביקח.
So go ahead, explain Rashi.
So the other nafkamina, if the Kohen Gadol, is the Kohen Gadol allowed to do Kiddushin with Bi'ah? Because if the Kiddushin happens at the Tchilat Bi'ah, then it should be fine. But if the Kiddushin happens at the end of the Bi'ah, then you find that he's doing Kiddushin on someone who has with a woman who is already Be'ula from the beginning of the act, and that's forbidden to him.
Because he needs to have the betula. So in many ways, this is about our halacha, but it's the context is the extreme halachas regarding a Kohen Gadol for that matter. Only a Kohen Gadol. Very, very much and very extreme definition there. So, he doesn't have to be Makadisher with Bia. He can be Makadisher with like everyone else, like with a ring. And you'll get out of this situation. But in case it was a Kohen Gadol, we have ourselves a problem. Okay, Inami a Kohen Gadol, the Konami, the Koni Betula Bia. So what's the halacha here? Amar Meir Mishmei the Rava. Dato al Gemar Bia, and I need a good translation and understanding of this. Sarah, you have an idea about this? Kol haboel, so about entering the man's thought. Kol haboel dato, his thought or his kavana is on Gemar Bia.
Let's see how I can do with a translation. Anyone who initiates sex intends to finish it, something like that.
Okay. Wants to win, wants to finish, we don't know what the finish means yet, but wants the wants.
Right. I was trying to find a way to explain it that was intentionally left that like the starts and the ends ambiguous, so we could not decide the terms too much.
Yeah. Anybody else want to respond? Okay. Anybody else? Okay. What do you got, Joel?
I just wanted to add in that because it talks about that, Rava says this is the dot of the average Boel, right? You could imagine then a case of it follows the person's dot, and we say like, okay, most people think this way, but if we have someone who makes an intentional statement that no, here's my intention beforehand, that it doesn't have to be Gemar Bia, it could be on the beginning of
fine. This would be, but I didn't expect that. The Rishonim have that, right? So Rishonim have that on there. But it's interesting because the Gemara's expression is very doesn't allow for exception. Does not allow for exceptions. Call everyone. So it means there's a chazaka that way. There's a sense of chazaka that way. It could be that we would ignore the individual who has his own way of thinking. His own kavanah that goes against the norm. In other words, the hazaka should be the norm. The fact, as I say that, the fact that there will be Rishonim who say if we have someone who's different, then we should go according to this. Therefore, even more radically says it's dependent on his stats. And it happens. Then almost everyone, then you have to explain away our Gemara here. I'm loath to explain away our Gemara because it seems to me so clear. Okay, fine. Let's go to the Tosfos. Anything else I should have said here? Okay,
I just think that maybe we should keep considering the other part of this, that if it's relying on Dato, then we're back to our earlier problem from a couple of weeks ago about what about her understanding of the situation. And unless he makes it explicit, then we don't know what his intention is when he starts the intercourse. So
okay, that's a fair question. Okay. Just leave it as a question. I don't have it. Let's see if anything comes up that will allow us to
Sorry, would
respond.
you mind repeating the question again? I missed that.
In other words, you have two people doing this act, and therefore, at some point, if I'm changing a little bit how it's said, do they need congruent deot in order for this to be as successful? She's, I only want a man who's going to go halfway, right? Right? Pointer sisters. Okay. Nobody knows here the Pointer sisters. Okay. She wants a slow man. Okay. So she has a different dot. They're so slow they never get to Gemar Bia. Okay. So would that make it so that should and he's only involved, he's only interested in he's interested in Gemar Bia. So does that create, I'm taking actually what you're saying and forming it as a question, does that disruption form a problem on its own? This is the kind of question that's usually not asked. I'm glad to be here while it's asked. I wish I was here for an answer also, but I'm not yet here for an answer. So let's keep it as a question.
But isn't that what the Gemara is basically answering? The Gemara is saying that everyone knows that when you engage in intercourse, like the very core element of the intercourse is Gemar Bia, and that's what everyone has their mind on. So the Gemara is saying at the end, right? Everyone that gets involved in intercourse knows that the main act or the main aspect of the action is the Gemar Bia, and that's where their dat is meeting. They all have that in mind.
Yeah, but not for the woman, because she has to derive Hana'ah. Because without Hana'ah, then there's no way to affect the Kiddush.
That's a
right,
big,
but we don't mention Yana here. It seems to be like a different
Hana?
type.
Who just said about Hana?
I did.
Who's you? Who? Gershon?
Gary Gershon.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Gary. Not everyone agrees on the Hana issue. Just telling you right now. In other words, not everyone agrees on the Hana issue. Okay, the biggest problem with the Hana issue, and where she could be makabel, literally makabel, she could literally be makabel without necessarily having Hana. And the best proof of that for those who think Hana is the issue is Bia Shalom Kedarka, which were there in reference to anal sex, which many Rishonim refer to as Inui, as oppression. Not all Rishonim say that, but they say that it's Inui. Therefore, for those who say that it's Inui, obviously it can't be Hana, because therefore Bia, we consider Bia Shalom Kedarka, generally in Gemara, right, is considered to be Bia, right? But it's a Bia in which the Hana issue is under debate.
Yes, but just because it's Lokadaka doesn't mean that Hana is not given.
Yeah, that's the other side.
If you define your terms as Machanish Rosh Atara, as the Rambam does, then especially for a Betula, the initial aspect of it is not, there's going to be no Hana until...
I think we're going to come to it. Finish your sentence. I'm sorry. Finish your sentence. Gary, finish up. I didn't hear it. Good.
The initial act for Betula would not necessarily be, she'd derive any Hana from it. Because it's actually quite painful. Well, I haven't actually done it myself, but the intention is, the understanding is that it's not, it doesn't start to become pleasurable until later. So Techilat Bia is not necessarily, there's not going to actually derive any Hana from it. That was kind of And into
So
the
you're
idea that
saying
the
for
woman's
one-
lying there waiting.
for the
expecting
techilas,
someone else
for the
being a
techilas
Not
via that, so even Hana would still work, perhaps, regarding.
eventually,
Bia Shalom
just not
Kedarka. Okay,
instantly.
but you still have Sophia, or, Gemar Bia.
How we're
which-
defining Sophia, if we're defining these as like,
We haven't defined it yet.
I know, but as in if we're
We haven't
defining,
done it yet.
you're going around like insertion of the Atzara, you're not gonna get Hana.
Let's wait.
But why are we discussing Hana'ah? Isn't that surely an issue of Kesef?
Like,
Kinyan
shit,
Kesef?
Yeah, I don't
It's not- So.
like, I don't think that's, I don't think that's a relevant thing.
What I have gone under the not assumption, but I think what I've no. Lexi, I'm just holding off on that we're going to get there very soon. Okay, and Nachum, the thing with Hana is issued that for evidently, the more similarities that we can have between the three forms of Kiddushin is considered, it's a desired result by some. Might not be, and actually, it is a desired result. You want to make these three ways in those ways where they can be similar. That allows for the differences to be even more bolate, more out there. Okay, so let's go to the Tosfos, and I apologize for stopping the conversation on several issues. Okay, Lexi, read the Tosfos. Tema. Can you or can you?
I need a second for that. If you want to call on somebody else, you can, or give me a second.
You have to find it. Well, take a second. We have two Tosfos, so we have this Tosfos and the other Tosfos, which is the parallel Tosfos and Yevamos.
Okay.
Um,
right.
Right. So now the first thing that Tosfos does for us is getting you ready for it. And the first thing that Tosfos does for us is it does the setup of regarding Techilat Bia.
So it's about
Okay. Well, read and see what you think. Tema.
I just don't see it just about Yavama on the Yavama one that says
No, I'm doing the Tosfot in Kiddushin.
Oh.
Koha.
Okay.
You're on it out.
Kolabal.
Yeah, I'm pulling it up. Also, you can call on somebody else if you want in the meantime while I'm pulling.
Okay, Sarah, you got it? You got Tosfos?
Sure. Okay. Kol haboel dato al gmar bia tema de perish habal yavamto yaflinan deish.
Perek.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Perek as opposed to perish.
Oh, Perik. Yes. Yeah. Habal. Now I've lost my place. Yaflinan de isha nikneit levaala behara. So in Yavamot, we learn that she is can be acquired through hera and not through a whole active bia. Diita kicha kicha de arayot. Uvehara hainu tchilat bia. Uvehacha masik de Sophia kona.
Okay, so the setup, right? The setup is that we have a lot of yikach in terms of the sexual act. Kikach ish isha ubala, that refers to Kiddushin, right? That's in Devorim Chaf Daled Aleph. That's the classic pasuk. And for the other kicha, for arayot, there's several cases. I wrote down the one which maybe is not the one that we would use, or maybe we would use. Vayikra Chaf Chaf Aleph, Bisha Shirikach et Eshet Achiv Nidahi. You take someone else's wife. This is Nida. You're out of the park by doing this. So we see that and we know that there is ha'ara with arayot effects chiyuv of whatever the chiyuv is, if it's horate or if if it's actually mita. So therefore kicha works. just like Easter, there's an Easter of Kritut, that's most of them, the Easter of Kritut and Ha'ara, so in Kiddushay Bia, there is Ha'ara. So therefore, Ha'ara. And then they say, Ha'ara Hainu Techilat Bia. Now we're starting to get the definition here of Ha'ara. What happens in Techilat Bia, that part. Okay, I'm sorry for interrupting so much, but go on. V'hacha.
V'hacha masik desof bia kona. Ve'omer Rashba. Dichi
Which
amrinan
Rashba is this? This is a Shimshon Mishans.
Right.
This is a
the Rash
Tosfos.
Mishan.
Yeah, it's a Tosfos.
Right, not the
Not
normal-
the
Rash-
not
the other
not our
Rashba.
famous Rashba, but he's pretty famous too in the Tosfos. Omer Rashba.
Dichi amrinan ha'ara kona. Hainu b'shelo asa ki im ha'ara ufi resh miyad demochach shelo hayadato liknot b'gemar bia.
Ah,
Right. So
Okay.
if he like did ha'ara and then immediately kind of backed out, that makes his intention clear that that was what he wanted to do. And that's somehow different than tchilat bia.
no, so it is. Well, I think Tosos is defining, something can help me. Tosos defines Techilat Bia as Ha'ara.
Right, but there's two kinds of hara, right? There's one where you do that and then immediately you stop,
Right.
right? And there's one where that's part of a longer process. And that's
It
I
leads
think,
to
the distinction
Gemar
that's
Bia.
trying to be made.
Gemar Bia. And this seems to us to show there are right here. There are situations that people have dots on Techilat Bia. It's called
And-
Ha'ara. It's
Right,
called
so
Ha'ara.
that allows us to explain the cases where it seems like hara actually does affect a change in status in Yevamot, because we're only talking about those cases where he like
Good.
it was very clear that that was his sort of full intention.
All right. Literally. Abal Hacha.
Aval hacha
You're
ma'iri
continuing the Rashba, right? Hacha Ma'iri.
de gemar biato de az lo kani behara kevan dato al gemar bia. Right, but in our case, not in Kiddushin, it's obvious that he's intending to do all of bia, and therefore he wouldn't be koneh with only hara.
Right.
Should I keep going?
Yeah, below Palmar. So say it again.
Ba'alash mochiach de ka'amar kol haboel v'lo ka'amar kol hama'ara.
Mhm.
Right, and that's sort of like etymologically clear because it says kol haboel and not right, and so that seems like it's talking about all of bia.
If we paskin that techilas, well, if we paskin for techilat bia, which is ha'ara, that's one thing. But what happens to ha'ara if we paskin indeed dato b'gemar bia? Maybe it's not, that's the general rule. This is a specific case here. What happens to ha'ara? It's really Asher's question. Asher wants to call it zanut, but what happens to ha'ara?
I think what the Rashba, can I interject here? Can I
Sure.
answer? I think what the Rashba is saying here is the Torah has a built-in flexibility. In other words, when the Torah says Bia is Koneh, it includes all types of things. And the Gemara's question was not which one works. The question was, what is the intent of the person in a normal case? And so the Rashba is saying, in other cases, his intention might be different. But the Torah, whenever we're defining what Bia is according to the Torah. The Torah included many different types of bia as working.
I think you're right in this Tosfos. In this Tosfos, I agree with you. That's what they're talking about. Yeah, and we'll see something different with others, in which actually the facticity of bia is going to be very important. But here, if it's on the dot, we can. So everything you said, I agree with, as long as we say we're talking about dots, as opposed to actually also what is, if you saw it, would you know what it is without having to look into a person's mind? What is still right now? Okay, I don't have to repeat.
Well, the
you.
Gemara
Okay,
is
now it's sort of
right. The Gemara is determining what a normal person's dot is in a normal case.
well, these determining between two sections, but okay, so like if he does it one way, he does it the other way. Okay.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Later. Okay, so let's continue. Sarah, continue. Rivam, by the way, who is the Rashbam's brother, Rivam.
Varivam tirates de hadiniknate behara hainu bimifarash sherotze likno behara aval stam dato gmarbi. So he says that when we say that it's possible for someone for him to be kona with hara, what we mean is a case where he explained that that's what he was going to do. But if he just did it, obviously we assume, like generally we assume that he intended to.
Right. And therefore exceptions are allowed, but you have to show that you're an exception. You have to somehow.
Yeah, and you have to state that verbally as opposed to have it just in your head.
Right says, tonight's ha'ara. I don't know. I mean, he has to say, he has to say it that way. We'll say for our anniversary of our first meeting, Bia Gemura, Gemar Bia. But right now we're doing ha'ara, and my dot's on ha'ara, and still don't know what her dot is, but hopefully she agrees to that dot. Okay.
Right. I mean, I think this does sort of go to some of Masha's point, right? Which is that, like, at least on this reading, she at least knows what his intention is because he's told her, or he's told somebody. Maybe he'd only tell the idiom and she doesn't know, but it seems like.
No, I think
he has some way of knowing what's going on in his head, at least.
I would say this could be a good proof. No, I agree with you. It moves towards Masha. I mean, that's what he's doing. But let's get to the third opinion. Okay, Rabbeinu Tam.
If I could just add something, I mean, the way I understood it is that there has to be some kind of meeting of the minds, right? They have to agree to a certain extent on like what's happening. So the default setting for Bia is that it's a Gemar Bia, right? That's a default setting, and that's where they meet together, and that's when the action takes place. That's where Shinei Kedushet. However, anything else could have happened so long as they agree with one another on what's considered Bia. If he said that's just Tahara and she agrees to it, there's no reason why it wouldn't work.
I get rid of the word just. It's Tahara, but fine. Okay, good. I think we're getting there. Okay, Rabbeinu Tam. Sarah, do Rabbeinu Tam.
Okay, Rabbeinu Tam tirates de achlaresha nitra bahara gmar bia imken kol makum hizkir via behara kamer. Whoa, yeah. Okay, so he wants to just read.
This is going away from Rav Nachman is going away from your pshat now. Your pshat works for the first two guys, I think. But for Rabbeinu Tam, he's saying no. There's a facticity about what ha'ara is, and in fact, ha'ara is a status thing. Ha'ara has the status of bia.
Right. I mean, I think it's less about like, or do we think it's about like the facts on the ground versus what it's in his head, and more just that he thinks that there's like, even in the world of facts on the ground, there's no meaningful distinction between Bia and Hara. Like Hara is just like a lot of Hara.
So
there's no difference in kind here.
It's like that. I think it's like this. Is that Bia certainly could be Gemar Bia. But Bia could also mean and here I use the word that I got rid of before, Ruben's word, just ha'ara. In other words, the most minimal form of bia in terms of our small categories right now would be ha'ara, and ha'ara works. And
Why would
therefore,
someone
every time
agree?
I'm just quoting the Tosfos here. Therefore, every time bia is mentioned, we're saying is that includes ha'ara. That includes the minimal effect of ha'ara. Joe, you going to agree with me?
I actually think Rav Landes saying, sorry, Lexi, were you jumping in there before I was? I think that he's saying something even more strong than that, which he's saying that every time it says bia in the Gemara or in the Torah, that means hara. And so when we talk about sofa versus Gemara, tchilatu Gemar, it's just tchilat hara or sof hara. And there's the Rav Landes just saying like, I'm just going to substitute the terms out. So I think he's actually really.
Doesn't make sense to me. Of course, it includes Gemar bia. Why wouldn't it explain?
I mean, that's
so
beyond.
Of course,
Yeah.
Gemar bia is a Gemar bia is a complete bia. That's what the words mean. But even ha'ara, which is a minimal bia, is considered bia. Therefore, you have to play. I'm just saying my thing again over. I'm not matabel with this. I think it means even only ha'ara.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm reading Rabbeinu Tam as like saying what we thought, sof bia, what we were talking about, whatever it means beforehand, forget that definition, swap out the word bia for hara. Those are interchangeable words. And we're only talking about the beginning and end of hara. And that's it. And end of story.
I mean, that seems kind of clear from the language, right? V'hachi ka'amar, he's like, okay, this is how you should read it. Tchilat ha'ara kona, osof ha'ara kona. He just wants to like plug in the words to tell you that like, the original question was a question about hara from the start.
Mm-hmm.
Which, yeah, I agree with that reading. I'm just like wondering if anyone has a sense of what motivated Rabbeinu Tam to give this explanation as opposed to the ones before it, just because it feels a bit like, to me, it feels the most ahuk to try and suggest that like we would really be encompassing when we're talking about the word bia. We were really just talking about like penetration of the corona. Feels like such an incredibly like limited way, and it feels a very non-shot way of understanding the way that we use the word bia. That like I'm wondering what is motivating him to use that explanation as opposed to the ones about like, oh, it's just that like in some cases hara works and in some cases it doesn't, or that like, yeah.
Could it be? I agree with that question. Actually, I think it's really key because you have to understand what's the motivation behind that. I understand the motivation of kiddushin with bia because effectively it involves no money. So the way that everyone can, in theory, affect the kiddushin. But why would we be so specific about hara in this case? Which doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, this I think I can answer because one of the last things you want to do is start penetrating somebody's head and try to figure out what's your kavanah. Much better to have the fact of what took place, and if what took place is meaningful, I mean, or affects kiddushin, creates kiddushin, then you're very fine. Did that take place or didn't it take place?
But we don't need kavanah.
As opposed to asking the guy, what were you thinking? Asking the gal, what were you thinking that he was thinking? When you want to put it on the dot, let me finish. When you want to put it on the dot issue, I think it's legally, practically. In other words, I think Rabbi Latam's being a good jurist. Lexi, what did you want to say? I'm sorry for interrupting.
No worries. I just like, I guess for at least some, I get that. I get the idea that like when we are relying on dot, it's like blurrier, and just saying that it's all about like physically what's occurring with ha'ara is a bit more cut and dry. But I feel like also the explanation of like imperish also doesn't rely on dot, right? I mean, obviously it's about assuming his dot vis-a-vis that, but it's not, it doesn't require actually needing to know what the dot is. It's just about like physically, was there like a full, like further sex act, or did he immediately separate after ha'ara? In that case, you wouldn't need to know what his kavanah was behind it.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like getting rid of the dot completely. I mean, still exists, but over reliance on that, I think, anyway, I said what I said about Rabbeinu Tam. I think he's going more to, what do you have, Yavni?
I have a question. What is the? Can someone explain this language? Rabbeinu Tam, דאחרי שנתרבתה ההערה כגמר ביאה. I just
Yeah.
don't know what that phrase meant.
I think it means after the Gemara discussed it and kind of, it came out, Rapta, it became, it doesn't mean, it connotes being established. But Rapta is ribui in terms of hermeneutically. Once it has, where a pasuk was marbeh, a pasuk, I guess what would be a term? Not established, but once it's not emerged. Once it was derived, actually wrapped up derived, we would say it connotes derived. Once
Meaning-
we came to that derivation, that bia can mean ha'ara, then it makes sense that in all situations it will mean that. And then I go back, because even though I'm down and not out, I think therefore what it means is that you even have to take ha'ara into question regarding these things. And now the question is, if it's techilat ha'ara kona osof ha'ara is kona. So what we're talking about here is the most minimal of ha'ara. How minimal can we go? If it's sof ha'ara, it's still only ha'ara. If it's techilat ha'ara, we're talking about a very little bit. Ulam di'amar. So who's reading? Sarah's reading. Go ahead. Ulam di'amar.
Ulam da'amar ha'ara zo hachnasat atara l'shayach b'tchila v'sof. And so,
Yeah.
right, for should I keep going?
No. So I mean, we have to get a shot of this.
Right. So
yeah.
For those who say that we're going to define what ha'ara is, it's hachnasat atara, and that is something that has a beginning and an end, and so it makes sense to talk about it in those ways. But you might have a havamina that wouldn't make sense to talk about it that way.
Okay, our fourth speaker, Rabbeinu Nisim Gaon. Go ahead, finish it up.
The Rabbeinu Nisim Gaon teretz dahahi de yevamot ayri achar kedushin. Okay, so he has a whole different way of solving the original Akashia, which is like, what about this Gemara in Yevamot that says that you can, that hara is sufficient for a kinyan, and he says, oh, that's actually only talking about after kiddushin. De al yedei ota hara have kinisua kimo chupa de leachar kiddushin. And really, what that's talking about is that it's talking about nisuin and not really kiddushin, and it's functioning like chava. But then that doesn't sort of fit with the psukim, which seem like they're actually talking about kiddushin dafka and not about chapa.
So Rabbeinu Nisim does have an answer. Tosfos has a problem with it, but he does have an answer. What does he effectively, as you said, he has a whole other answer. What does that do to ha'ara in terms of affecting kiddushin?
Presumably, it doesn't affect kiddushin.
It doesn't affect kiddushin. So,
but it does affect nisuin, which seems bizarre.
No. Well, he says, Tosfos is against it. But Rabbeinu Nisim says, look, once she's been mekadesh, it doesn't say it here. Once she's once she's mekadesh, then the next step is a simple step. Now, we'll see it or we won't see it, but what other Rishonim have to say, or they seem to indicate is, he brings her to his home. When he carries her over the threshold to his home, that's considered nisuin. That's one possibility. Or the other possibility is chuppah. Or the third possibility is ha'ara. Rabbeinu Nisim will say that ha'ara doesn't affect Kiddushin. That's a big jump from being single to being Mekudeshet. That's a big step, and we need something more than Ha'ara. But the step of moving from a person's Mekudeshet to becoming Nesuah was a couple of brachas, or it's a chuppah, because a couple of people raised an old talus or something. How much more so that Ha'ara is effective there? That's the argument for it. That's the argument for it. Tosfos is leery of it, but that's the argument for it. So then you bring back. So therefore, then you bring back Ha'ara, but in a place in which we never would have expected it. Okay, good. Now let's move ahead. I know I have to figure out how to move ahead further, but let's look. I want to do it this way. Let's look at Yevamos Nun Hey. We know that, okay, in Nun Hey, there is a full statement or an attempt. Now we're back in the Gemara. Maybe I should have done this earlier because we only did one almond so far. But we have an attempt to define Ha'ara. In terms on the basis, what is Ha'ara? Not on the basis in the Gemara of anything having to do with Das, in terms of the impact of Ha'ara, but just what Ha'ara is. So that's Omar Shmuel, which is like 15 lines from the bottom. Omar Shmuel Ha'ara Zu. Okay, so I want you to read, and let's do it this way. You read, and let's see how many different definitions we have. Okay, I just want to get through it. So you go definition 1, you do definition 2, you got it. Okay, Amar Shmuel.
Amar Shmuel, Ha'ara zo nishika. So Shmuel says that Ha'ara is a kiss, but here it seems like what he means is like the outward touching of the genitals. Mashal Adam shmaniach etzba'o al piv i'afshar shelo yidchok habasar. So he says this is comparable. It's like if somebody like sets their finger on their mouth, it's like impossible that like the flesh won't be kind of like pressed in a little bit. But basically, I think he's saying that like if there's contact between the genitals, it's impossible that there won't be like some small amount of penetration, even if it's not significant.
Okay, so right, so and we'll use his word dechika, and dechika is already a form of dia. Or it's a form, maybe we would say penetration. Dechika is present, that's as far. Okay, so that's one definition.
That's one definition. Thank you. Ata Rabba Bar Chana, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Gemar Bia B'Shivcha Charufa, Zo Hachnasat Atara. So Bar Chana says in the name of Rabbi Yochanan that the Gemar Bia, so now we're like Shmuel was defining for us Ha'ara, Rabbi Chana, and then Rabbi Yochanan is saying that Gemar Bia is when you have like put the entirety of the corona in, like penetrated the entirety of the corona.
Yeah, but wait, let me ask you a question. Therefore, how does he hold by? What does he hold regarding Shmuel? Is he opposed to Shmuel, or is he actually agreeing with Shmuel?
No, he's probably like, it seems to be roughly agreeing with Shmuel that like if we say that Ha'ara is different than Gemar Bia, then if it would make sense to say Ha'ara is like the very beginning of like the sort of outward contact of the genitals, and then Gemar Bia being the like full entry of the corona. That like it works very well with Shmuel, because calling just Hachnasat Atara Gemar Bia, like it's a very minimal act. So if you're going to call that Gemar Bia, it makes sense that the Tchilat Bia would be like just the very beginning of contact.
And it makes sense in terms of the context here. You just told me what what Ha'ara is at the beginning. So now tell me what it is at the end. And now we have it. Okay, Mati, read the next couple lines. Mati Rav Sheshet.
Mati Rav Sheshet. Zera eno chayav ela al biat hamerok. My love merok gid. Well, merok atara. So Rav Sheshet raised a contradiction against this, saying that it uses the term like of shichvat zera, right? It uses that term vis-a-vis the charufa, that like one isn't chayav in the case of the charufa until one has biat. I'm assuming biat hameruk is like a biat that involves ejaculation. And it's like, what is this not ejaculation of like the full ever? And then it says, the Gemara says, no, it doesn't have to be ejaculation of the full ever. It could be like pre-cum from the corona.
So what's translating? So you're translating miruk as ejaculation.
Yeah, I mean, Rashi says merok mazriya, and also I'm assuming just like since merok is like spit, that.
That's right. So that, I think that's where it comes. I remember seeing the Sansino translation when I was 8 years old. He used the word friction. Sansino. Couldn't figure out friction. So no, that would work too. So the miruk, so the that's right. But here it gives us it ups the ante. In other words, it's saying, it's saying, right? It ups the ante.
Yeah.
It says,
My-
right?
I'm just wondering, like when it says merok atara versus merok gid, would it just be referring to like full ejaculation versus pre-cum?
Yeah, well, I don't think they make it this, well, here in the sense they're aware of that. They're aware of it. So once there's a drop, right? And theoretically, a drop could be mazriya. And therefore, it brings back or brings us to the notion that what we're really interested in is an act that potentially could lead to pregnancy.
Right, at least in the charufa case.
Yeah. Kiyasa Rabdini, we're collecting information.
Right, so that's the right. So we have this motif that suggested maybe that like it would have to be Gemar Bia would have to be entry of the entire gid because like you would need ejaculation. They're like, no, you could have some form of ejaculation even with just the entry of the atara.
So there is a desire here to still keep it somewhat minimal.
Right, or at least
still the atara. Okay, good.
At least to defend the idea that it could be just about the penetration of the atara. Aki atara dimi amar Rav Yochanan ha'ara zohach nasat atara. So Rav Dimi came, he said that Rav Yochanan had taught that ha'ara is when you like enter, when you penetrate with the corona. What was it that Rav Chana had said? Rav Yochanan said, that was about that was Gemar Bia was Haknasat Atara. Right. Okay. So this is where we get the contradictory opinions about Rabbi Yochanan. So
all right. So now repeat that. There's two opinions. One is Shmuel that says what, and one is Rabbi Yochanan.
This isn't actually there's several different opinions. On the one hand, we have Shmuel says ha'ara is like the outward contact of the genitals. Rav Dimi in the name of Rav Yochanan says ha'ara is like the actual full entry of the corona. And Rabbi Barachana doesn't talk about ha'ara, but he says that in the name of Rav Yochanan that Gemar Bia is Hachnasat Atara, implying that according to that opinion, Rabbi Yochanan would think that ha'ara is presumably something less than Hachnasat Atara.
Ha'ara zu Hachnasat Atara. Okay, Amrulay.
Amrulay v'hara Barachana lo amar hachi. Right, and so this is what you're saying, like, but they told him, well, Rabbi Barachana didn't say the same thing about Rabbi Yochanan's opinion. Amar lahu u'yuhu shakrai u'ana shakrai. So he's like, well, one of us must be lying then, because we're both talking about Rabbi Yochanan. So we can't both be right. Want me to keep going?
Yeah.
Okay. Ki ataravin amar Rabbi Yochanan ha'ara zo hachnasat atara. So when Ravin came, he said in the Rav Yochanan that ha'ara is hachnasat atara, which that supports Rav Dimi's report. The de Hachnasat Torah, ad Rabbi Chana vadai palig, ad Shmuel milema palig. So this statement of Rabin and also the one of Rav Dimi definitely are in dispute with Rabbi Bar Chana, who said that, like, according to Rabbi Yochanan, Hachnasat Torah is Gemar Bia. But like, are they disagreeing? Ad Shmuel milema palig lo nishika. Right. So like, do we have to say that they're in dispute with Shmuel, right?
Shmuel, who said, just reminding us.
Who said that Ha'ara was Nishika.
Yeah.
And then we say lo minishika ve'ad hachnasat atara Ha'ara karila.
That's a very important answer.
Right. So we don't, maybe like this actually isn't in dispute with Shmuel. Because maybe he was saying that Nishika is like the beginning of what we call Ha'ara, but that the entire process from Nishika until Hachnasat Atara is Ha'ara according to Shmuel.
I want to ask you a question. You tell me now process. What about if it's not process? In other words, maybe the pshat is that Nishika is called Ha'ara. And if you did continue, you would end up with Hachnasat Atara, but maybe not. Maybe just Nishika, the external pressing, would be sufficient to be called Ha'ara. Which way is it?
Sorry, are you asking for like what you?
I'm asking what the shot here is.
I mean,
you said, well, Nishika ba'ad, meaning you said it's a process to Hachnasat Ha'ara.
I mean, I think
I'm just saying maybe Nishika, there's nothing more than Nishika. Nothing more than Nishika. Is he saying here this is Ha'ara?
Like, I think on the one hand, I don't think that this later reading of Shmuel is like so dachuk. On the other hand, I think probably the simplest reading of Shmuel is that he thinks that like Nishika is in and of itself Ha'ara. But I don't think it's like so dachuk to say that like he could understand that as like, he's like, yeah, that's like how Ha'ara is about this, like, is kind of a process. It's not like one specific moment. And so like Nishika is kind of the beginning of that process. I don't think it's like a crazy reading of Shmuel. I do think the more pshat reading of him is that he thinks Nishika is itself Ha'ara.
Okay.
We reach more to the lines of Rabbeinu Tam, which mean like Rabbeinu Tam was saying that the whole process of Bia is Ha'ara, right? So maybe according to Shmuel, Nishika would be the beginning of Bia, and then the Hachnasat Torah would be like soft, or like somewhere in the middle.
Well, right. So that would be the Rabbi Bar Chana opinion, right? So that's like that would be us saying that the Rav Dimi and Ravine opinions are palig on Shmuel, but right. And like that is one of the presentations of it. So it's either that or it's that no, he thinks that like this is all part of Ha'ara and Gemar Bia would be something beyond entering of the Corona.
So let's continue with the next part. Continue reading. We have another sheet that's coming up.
So ki ad Rav Shmuel Bar Yehuda Amar Rabbi Yochanan Ha'ara zo hachnasat atara Gemar Bia mamash. We hated those words. They're so annoying. Okay, so when Rav Shmuel Bar Yehuda came and said we have another opinion in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, which is that this is the third person we have implying that Rabbi Yochanan thinks Ha'ara is hachnasat atara, which seems to like, it seems like we're like, not in favor of Rabbi Bar Chana, since there's three other people who have a different reporting of Rabbi Yochanan. But he says Rabbi Yochanan believes that like Ha'ara is when you penetrate with the Corona, and Gemar Bia is Gemar Bia, which is kind of like a Gemar Bia mamash, right? Like, you know what I mean, but like we don't actually know what you mean because we have like a bunch of different definitions here. Like I'm assuming that they mean Gemar Bia mamash, they mean ejaculation, but they could just mean like full penetration.
I don't think it's ejaculation. They don't. Shifra.
Penetration?
Not against Shechazera, but I don't think it's reached that way because they have not brought Shechazera in sufficiently definitionally. I think they would have said it stronger. So that's what I think. So I'll keep it that, we'll nonetheless keep it as a question, but continue on Nun Vav Amud Aleph.
Okay. מכאן ואילך אינו אלא נשיקה ופטור לה ופלג עד השמואל.
And
Right.
best to read Rashi. Everyone go to Rashi.
Right, so
מכאן
מכאן
ואילך.
ואילך מהכנסת עטרה ולמטה אינו אלא נשיקה ופטור. Right.
What's
So
ulamata mean?
ulamata means like less than that. Literally, ulamata is like from like less of the penis.
We could just say and earlier in the process, if you want to say process.
That like anything less than the
Right.
entire corona entering is like lav klum essentially, and your putter.
Eno ela neshika. Okay.
Right, and that's
Upater.
like
Keep
other
on going.
Shmuel that is read as being, you know, this is in disagreement with Shmuel. Shmuel would minimally say, like, whether he says that, like, Nishika is Ha'ara and, like, Hachnasat Atara is Gmar Bia, or whether he says Ha'ara is, like, Nishika ad Hachnasat Atara. In either case, he thinks that's a significant act, whereas this opinion would say, no, just Nishika is not a significant act.
I want to do one short Rashi on top of this. Sanhedrin. What did I give you? Nun Hey? I think it's Nun Hey Amud Aleph. Did we look at a short Rashi? It's kind of like it's almost a summary Rashi in its own way. Ha'ara. So it's like from the Rashi side, the Sanhedrin, I think it's Nun Hey Aleph, Haba'al Behema, Ben Kedarka, Ben Shaloka Darka. That's how the Gemara begins. Joel, is that Nun Hey Amud Aleph?
It is, yeah.
Okay, people have it. Can you get it? You have it? Okay. Sarah, can you get it? Asher, you have it? This is important, Rashi. Okay. Hama'ara. Hama'ara. We're not going to the, just his definition. Shalo Gomar Biato. Equal amount of Amar Zu Nishikat. Nishikat Aver Al Hadekav. Okay, it's more graphic, you know, that's what Ha'ara is. We've called this before Techilat Ha'ara, or we call it, right? Zoom the Shikat, so it's in the Shikat of the Aver of the phallus al hanekad on the opening. The Ikol Amandiyama Hara Zu Hachlasat Atara. But according to this goes well with them. It says Hara is Hachlasat Atara. Tehu Devar Mu'at Avol Yoter Hu Al Nishikat. I think what so Rashi's saying is the gradations here are slight, but important. So Ha'araz Hachlasat Atara, the Nishika is external. Mihu Gave Arayot, Kaimalon Ha'arat Gemar Bia. For being over on Easter Koret, right? All I did was touch with my member. It is renders one liable to Koret as much as it was Gemar Bia. Dichtiv Benida et Makora Ha'aran Vayikra Chaf Yudchet. It says the Ksiv et Makora Ha'ara. Right? If Ha'ara, he did Ha'ara on her source, on her Makora, and this is what we're talking about: the touching of the member to the Makora, V'alfinan shar arayot me'nida. The Hekesh Shadra Viona, that's something just you should know. We have a Hekesh. Can't call Asher Yasem Mikala Tevota Elu. And this is Vayikra Yudchet Pasuk Tet. He said, if you do any of these Toavot, Kosh Baruch Hu says, you got a problem. Hukshu Kulan Zelaza. They have compared all of them. So is Rashi saying something different than what we saw in the Gemara? Is Rashi different? Or is he the same? I mean, Rashi gives us more information.
There was also, this is a different Rashi in Sanhedrin that Yavni and I were trying to look through all the different places where it mentioned Gemar Bia to figure out what the conclusion was about Gemar Bia. And there's another one where Rashi talked about Gemar Bia as being like the removal of the Bitulim, which I'm assuming he thinks happens with like full penetration of the penis. I don't know. It isn't like, it's clearly not about ejaculation, but is I think the removal of Bitulim, aka like penetration.
And that's a general Rishon opinion. Yeah.
Okay, so that's what they end up holding, is that like Gemar Bia in general is like full penetration / breaking of like quote unquote.
Right. So that Rashi is crucial. We do it with this Rashi, which gives us Nishika, which emphasizes the slightness of it, and also emphasizes the fact that in terms of being high of karet, that the Nishika makes one as liable than as Gemar Bia, as liable, and that's where this part will end. Except I want to do one more thing in Rashi, and then we'll stop. Mishka ve'isha. This is of course the pasuk regarding homosexual sex, and that the Zoba is a quote from the pasuk of Mishka ve'isha. I should have had the pasuk with me. Where's the pasuk? Okay, I'll look it up during the break, maybe. Mishka ve'isha, the Zachor, Michael Maboyle called the Mechayev Bisha, Mechayev Nami Bay. But that there are different forms. Mishka ve'isha is used for, in the case for a drasha to tell you that just as male sex involves bia shelo kedarka, anal sex, that's what the pshat is regarding the basic pshat regarding heterosexual sex, that bia shelo kedarka refers to anal sex. And that's the pasuk. He did to her mishkavei isha, because there's more than one kind of sex that you can have with a woman. According to this pasuk, you can have bia shelo kedarka, vaginal sex, you can have bia shelo kedarka, anal sex, and that's pshat, but you should know this pasuk. Okay, let's take a break. Okay, 5 minutes, come back. We'll finish up some section at least. Thank you. Tom, which is a great book. Personal meaning. I've been emptying out because I had most of my books in storage, and I've been emptying them and trying to place them. And I was thinking about Sefer Yashar, because I remember we had a Chiddush, and I opened up a box, and the Sefer Yashar fell in my head. Kind of felt good. Then I realized he lived from 1100 to 1171, and I'm 71. Not that I think about it, not that it's on my mind at all. Okay, so in this regard, tell me when we reach a chiddush here, and Sefer Yashar tells us something that we haven't seen. You have the Sefer Yashar, Yavni? You have that in front of you? Can you find it? Did you find it?
Not yet. I'm working on it.
No, tell me we get it. Reuben, get the Sefer Yashar. Masha, get the Sefer Yashar. Gershon, do you have it? Sefer Yashar is, I think, one of the last things I sent you. Second to last thing I sent you. It's there at the very end. It's
I've got it.
Okay. I'm gonna read. But tell me, when I Hadam himself be a kona tichas bin a kona, Tashita or Pasha, because there's a Lithuanian to Pasha, Kol ha-boel dato al gemar bia. Alma behara dahainu techila bila lo koni. V'hakanalon ba'abal yevemto, dechol bahara chashuva bia, chutz meshifas charufa, the part la katuv shichvat zera, the be'inan miruk hagid, in that case miruk hagid. Well, wait. So what we're saying is, so we have a problem, right? We're saying it's all based on that's Gemara bias of what things are, but ha'ara, which is techilas bia, would not fit. Techilas bia lo kone. But we see in Abal Yavemto that ha'ara is very good. This is what we've been talking about this last hour, correct? Oh man, thank you, Rabbi. Okay. So now we're in the fourth line. Isha labala amrina bedya minayin atya. Where does this come from? That the Isur. I mean, excuse me. That you could be kona atya kicha kicha ve'asher yikach et achoto mahatam ha'arach hatshuva as a Isur korek. Right, chashuva. Excuse me. Mahatam ha'arach chashuva bia is considered as bia. Afkan ha'arach chashuva bia. So to hear hara in the case of kikach should consider bia. In kain kashin ha'adoni. Right. Even so, we have this problem. Right. We have this situation. So which way does it go? Does ha'ara work? Ha'ara doesn't work. The teretz masha teretz hasan hechlif et the shita. They changed the shita, and they said that was okay. Ha'ara works. The nearly the low kashav omidi the ha iboy alum bekidushin ahad napak la ulon biyavamos. The hara chashuvahi. Hara works. Umiata kuli talmuda kari hara ha'ara. That's what we just had seen before. And that was, who said that, Shita? Was that Rabbeinu? No, who
That was Rabbeinu Tam,
yeah. And this is Rabbeinu Tam. This is his book, right? Kidnan hayavama niknis rabia v'hainu ha'ara. Al parchenu. We're forced into it. Why does he say we're forced into it? Anybody have an idea on this? I can't see anybody right now, so tell me if anybody has an idea. Let me know. Why does he say al parchenu? Yeah, because we get it from the kicha. That's what forces us. The gezerah shava forces us. And just as kicha and b'harayot can mean or does mean even ha'ara, so too in kiddushin it means ha'ara. Further than that, v'chein ha'isha niknik begimel derachim, right? Bebia hainu ha'ara kedemuchach b'yavamos. V'chein b'chuli talmud kori ha'ara b'lashon bia. He repeats this. B'hachi yiboyelon. So therefore, what's the question here? Techilas ha'ara kono sof ha'ara kono. That's the question. It's not techilas bia, it's techilas ha'ara. Specific form ha'ara. We've seen that, but he's repeating it. Kona. The iflagu amorai. Hasam lamar neshika hainu ha'ara. Lamar neshika lab hainu ha'ara at hachnasat ha'ara. So far, is there anything new? I think seeing this, for me at least, it helps me. Because for those who hold Hachnasa Sahara, then the Shika is nothing. Then the Shika is nothing. The Sugya de Shmaitin command Omar Hachnasa Satora. And our Sugya here seems to refer to Hachnasa Satora, the Chain Halacha. But what's new here is he takes a side and he passes. And therefore, Ha'ara, yes, but not Techilat Ha'ara would be Nashika, but rather Sof Ha'ara, which is Hachnosas Atara.
He's saying that's what we're learning in Kiddushin,
Right.
adding the
Yeah.
Kiddushin to the Yevamot. Yeah,
No, say another word. Go ahead.
because he's saying like if we read Kiddushin as asking the question, is it Tchila or Sof of Hara, not of Biyah? That's the essential one, and we say it's Sof Biyah, then, and we say it's Sof Biyah, which means Sof Hara. Then what is Sof Hara according to the Yevamot definition of Sof Hara? Like the one definition that specifies a beginning and an end to the Hara, that's Achnasat Atara.
Right, and we've made a decision on it, according to this, which goes against, Lexi says, that would go against the process idea. This
Right,
is what, there's different parts, but you have to decide which one is meaningful in terms of Ha'ara affecting Kiddushin or
Yeah.
affecting the rest. Anybody else?
Just for clarification, is Rabbi Tam saying that Ara and Bia are the same thing? Like he's using these words like in a interchangeable manner?
There was a discovery that took place. We found out when we started thinking about it that Bia meant Ha'ara. I put in, Landes puts in even Ha'ara. But when he says, when you say even Ha'ara, then you have to go to Ha'ara because Ha'ara becomes the bar by which you discuss what Ha'ara is. How much of, then the question becomes quite good. Really, even infinitesimal Ha'ara, like Nashika, right? Like Nashika, even infinitesimal? No. Ha'ara, according to this answer, has to be Gemar Ha'ara, which is Hachnasat Torah. Things are starting to work out, according to at least in terms of this shot. And what do we have left with Nashika? We saw already in the Gemara. So what's left with Nashika? Could very well be that we're throwing out Nashika, except we'll see whether Nashika makes a case for itself or not. But right now they're throwing out Nashika. Anybody disagree with me? Okay. Then I want to go back that I am not so worried about, yes, dot becomes important, but it has to be dot on something which is significant. And Nashika right now seemingly is not, I'm saying it. Nashika, he's not saying it, I'm saying Nashika seemingly is not significant. He's just repeating. And what's ha'ara? Hachnasat atara. Okay. V'hachi perush, and this is what it means. Techilat bia kona. The beginning of bia is kona. Klomar, yeshna lebia metechila bad sof, kishiyachil arot, yachil liknot. This doesn't make sense to me now. Techila bia kona, klomar yeshna lebia. Oh, bia right. Techilat bia is sof ha'ara. I can't see anybody. Joel, do you agree with me on that?
I want to read it again. So let's see what no,
V'hachi perush.
yeah,
Techilat bia klona. The techilat bia klona. Klomar yeshua bia metchila bad sof. Kishiyachil harot yachil liknot. But what is yachil? It only means.
I think it means Nashika there, right?
No, I don't think it means Nashika.
Does it? Because I lost my place because Rav Nachum, I was looking at a different screen. And,
I think if you read the next bit, it becomes clearer.
Who's saying that?
Yavni.
You read.
Yavni.
Mihu.
Mihu im peresh kodem hachnasat atara pshita de lo kana.
Good. Mihu is not a word we would use. But mihu, translate mihu here. Sometimes mihu, in terms of your own translation, it's good to translate mihu as not nonetheless, but mihu sometimes means indeed, indeed. Indeed, if he's finished or he finished his sexual action before the Hachnasata Torah, there's no kinyan. I mean, there's no kiniyah. He has not acquired her. He's not liable to. He's well, maybe for.
Well, I actually think mihu here is, however, because I think it's like that like it is actually kind of saying that like on the one hand, like the beginning of penetration is the beginning of the process of kinyan. On the other hand, if you begin that process but you don't even penetrate with the full corona, like it's kind of anything that you've done has been reversed. You haven't actually accomplished kinyan, right? Because as you begin to penetrate, that's the beginning of the process. But if you separate before penetrating the full corona, then you haven't actually done anything.
So therefore, fine. I'm ready to go with it. Just the reading day. But in terms of significance, it's telling us. I mean, it sounds like I'm repeating, but I don't think I'm repeating exactly. That there's a kind of fact. There's a status. Not fact. There's a status. There's a bar. There's reality. There's a physicality that must be met to be considered to be bia. And ha'ara, sof ha'ara fits it, and techilat ha'ara, which is nishika, doesn't fit it. And even though you might want to say that when I do this, it's still not bia. It's still not bia. It's not sufficient bia. Somebody say to me that I'm right. I think that's what's shot.
I think so. I think we should go on and read the next piece because I think he's going to try to.
You read it now.
All right, now I'm on the. I see if I can get all the parentheses right here. Elahecha de gamar kol ha'ara, dichnis atara, mi amrinan sheitchil le'arot, hitchil liknot, vekoneh veholech ad gamar ha'ara, odilma a'eno ela lebesof b'gamar ha'ara talu kiddushin, vekodon lachen lo.
This is very good. We've had this discussion. What's this discussion about? What we
it's
talked
really,
about this.
This is the question: is it a process or is it a point? Right, essentially.
Very good, very good. And he's asking that, right?
Mhm.
Lexi, it's your question. It's a question or machlokas I had with you, right? Is it a process or a point?
Yeah, and then
Vidamia, go ahead.
Vidamia lishna. Oh, sorry, I got to try to follow these lines here. Le she kiarot.
No,
schirut. There we go. Okay, that makes sense. Lishna l'schirus mitchila v'ad sof. Oh, ina ela lebesof. All right, so it's similar to the same thing for business transactions. I assume he means, right? It's at the beginning.
Yeah,
of
but
the
no, but it also refers to a kinyan of. No. We're talking about kiddushin.
We are okay.
You say a man says to the woman, I'm engaged on the fact that I am going to work for you. I will carry you around on my back. I will make you diamonds. Anyway, I will work in the kitchen. Whatever it is. And
this is the whole question. Someone comes in between during that time and tries to marry her. Was he married to the first one? Is this the?
The problem, by the way, why they, as I remember the sugya, why they say you can't do it, that it actually is the point of the soap. They don't want to create a halva. This will be equivalent as a loan, and you can't be mekadesh on a loan. Can't be mekadesh is, I owe it to you. Can't be mekadesh in that. And they're afraid that the sechirut, how do you call schirut in English? Schirus, the hiring.
Hiring.
The hiring. That the hiring will lead, therefore it's no good, and therefore we only go to the soap schirut. Keep on going. The damia,
All right. L'schirut michlei v'atzof. Or in elo l'sof v'dami leplukta de Rabbi Yochanan v'Reish
Yeah,
Lakish.
right. So therefore, right. But then we'll
Yeah.
put to the Yochanan Reish Lakish, right?
Mishum Levi Saba b'shchitat chulim. Yeshna l'shchita mitchila v'atzof. Oina.
And what's the answer?
It's only sof there, right?
It's only so. In other words, we all go to the sof, where there seems to be an allergy for the process of the whole thing. In other words, they want a point of a decision, a point of being kona, and he's giving these other examples. The nafkamina.
Nafkamina kinim faresh ve'azil. All right, so one they separate before getting to that point. Inami lechon gadol.
No.
Oh no, as it goes on to explain. Sorry. That yes,
Yeah.
that's my bad there on the
Okay. Inami.
So it goes on to explain was another person marries, she sticks her hand out the window, puts a ring on her, or whatever it may be. Inami lechon gadol. Right? Iamrina and Yeshna Levia mitchila v'atzof kane shrei kashid chil liknot betulahi. All right. Right. This is what we saw in the Rashi. Ela iamart ena ela levasof lo likne bevia de kodem sheagia liknot dehainu gemar ha'ara la betulahi. Right. So therefore, he's now doing the kinyan on a non-betula, and it's not. He's not supposed to do that as a kohen.
I want to point out just as this is a great way of expressing the question. Going back to process and point, he brings these other examples. Is it a process or is it a point? And a process would be more inclusive, and a point would be, there's one point in which he was a betula, there's another point which he is a beula, and there's a third point in which you want to be kona here, but you're the kohen gadol, and you can't be kona a beula, which is a special requirement of your job. Or specific.
It still works. It's just asur, right, for kohen gadol. Right?
Well, yeah. Okay, I'll make a good movie. Okay. Duke of Windsor, the kohen gadol of Windsor. Okay. Then he was able to marry the divorcee, but he lost the kingship.
Exactly. Yeah.
Which was good because he was a Nazi anyway. Okay.
Denihi de bia lo have ad gemar hara. Mihu lo garami bia shelo kedarka. De afal gav de lo havya bia gemora shirai ba le acher mishalem knas ken amrinan beshilhi ben sorah more. Afilo hachi psula lechuna ken amrinan be'avamot. Okay,
no, stop. Okay, you can read one more line.
Kamoken zo kodem gemar hara psula mina kuna, right? Because he can also already be pasul mina kuna before he's even done hara. Velomatz lemikne bevia shrei kodem haknia. She's psula, rather. Sorry. Velomatz lemikne bevia shrei kodem haknia. Eina betula, and the curse is over that word. Is vikatav. Vikatav vihu isha biftuleha ikach. Right, b'shakicha ba'inin shetia betula. And so if the kicha has to happen, then it doesn't. He can't do it. Okay.
So I don't think right now he's added much. He's just working it through, so we understand the halacha. But there is something in here. What's the business about Bia Shelo Kedarka here? He throws that in. And how does that, why is that significant here?
I mean, it implies that like Bia Shelo Kedarka, that it implies that our main concern is not sex that one could theoretically become pregnant from. Right, that like we seem to like really, if Bia Shelo Kedarka is relevant to the process of kinyan, then it seems that like questions of ejaculation / like potential for sex that could be impregnating sex is not the qualification you're using.
So that remains with the shivcha charufa. Shivcha charufa is a crazy case. We should go through the pasuk. Maybe we'll do it next time too. But only shivcha charufa do we have this shichat zera as being a requirement. Everywhere else, it's the sexual act without shichvas zera. So that's one part. The second, so you're right. The second thing is, however, the second thing is that the Kohen Gadol has a possibility. He could be kona her through Bia Shalom Kedarka. And that way she's still a Betula. And there's no question of Betulim. So Ha'ara in that case would work. Strange case, but it would work. Okay, I don't know how much more we have to do with this, but there might be one more thing. No, no, I don't want to. So anyway, it just repeats at the end, Joel.
It's
Four lines in the Bible.
Ben Sorer, and I don't see it yet. Here you go. Hanicha Laman De'asar Demar rather. Ha'ara Zonashika Shapir. Right. So the one that says that it's just Ha'ara that works. Ha'ara is Nashika, that works well, which is Shmuel, right? Do I have that right? I think. Elo Laman De'amar Ha'ara Zoach Nasata Tara Ma'ika Lamimar. Right. So Lav Mishum the
So we have now, as it were, a proof. Bring back Nashika.
Mm-hmm.
Because the Nashika takes care of the case of the Kohen Gadol.
Yeah.
If you say Nashika is there, and you say Nashika is Ha'ara, and Ha'ara is Bia, therefore he could be Kona her, and there's no other there's no other difficulty.
Mm-hmm.
But okay.
Keep going. Should I answer
I think we're really I think actually we're finished on the last line or so on the next page.
There you go. Should I just vein?
Yeah, the aim. No, start with the page before. The aim Lagan game B'Lashon Talmud. Everyone, the last line on that first page of the Sefer HaYashar. Middle. The aim Lagan game. Read there.
Okay, hold on a second. It's ve'im legamgem B'Lashon Talmud de'kamar kigon shehara ba. Shehara ba. Why does
Kigon shehara ba? No, don't. I was about to say screw up.
Don't be megamgem. Yeah, it's yeah.
Yeah, don't screw it. The ein lomar.
Ve'im lomar dehichil leharot de'ein ze Lashon Talmud. Miu perusha hachi hushit chil leharot vad shelo gemar pesula.
I'm not sure why the word pesula here. Vad shelo gemar.
That she's already, yeah.
Right. Through that. Okay.
From a Kohen Gadol, yeah.
He just says there. Okay. Let's think back now on the Sefer HaYashar. Have we learned anything from the Sefer HaYashar? What's the Sefer HaYashar's general gisha? What's his direction? He takes it upon himself to say Bia really is Ha'ara. He continues that we've heard already. What does he add to that we have?
Itself is a process that takes time, and so there can be things that are affected at the beginning of it and things that are affected at the end of it.
That's one possibility. Before he says that, what does he say? You're right. He says that at the end. What else does he say? Anybody else?
Well,
go ahead, Joel.
I think he thinks the debate in the Gemara is not about 2 points; it's about a point versus process, right? That's his big chiddush.
And how does he hold?
He holds it's about points.
What?
It's about a point and not about a process. Is what he holds the halacha.
And therefore, what's that point?
The point is Gemar Bia, which is Ha'ara and not Nashika.
Gemar, there's Bia, which is Gemar, which is Ha'ara, which is Gemar Ha'ara. It's not Nashika. And what does that do for us?
It settles the two Gemaras.
It settles the Gemaras. And what does it do to Ha'ara?
Makes it important.
Yeah, well, it makes it important. It gives it a significance, but also gives it a definition. It has to be Gemar Ha'ara. What's Gemar Ha'ara? Finishing the full Hachnasat Atara. Now, Lexi, you had said that earlier in some ways, but here he works to prove it. I mean, he works it out, I think, that it's the full Hachna, full Hachnasat, and then you have a definition. And then you have something. What I still don't know is whether Nishika still works to make someone chayav increases or incretut or not, because I just wasn't sure of it there. But that we'll all have to think about. Okay, we have a couple.
We've said explicitly that it makes her, it defines her as be'ula, right? That's necessary for the
right. It defines her as be'ula.
Well, once he his whole thing at the end, right? Once he paskins that it's Gemarbia, which is Ha'ara, not Nashika or Ha'ara, then he has to have it so that the Kohen Gadol, that she's no longer Betula, right? Because the nafkamina is that the Kohen Gadol then cannot do Kiddushin B'via, at least in this method. And so yeah, for Betula, it has to be.
So we got to drop. So right now, just for a moment, drop the Kohen Gadol because that's just a normal. Ha'ara, it normalizes Ha'ara. I just learned that. Ha'ara is normalized, but Ha'ara has to be something. Nishika is not sufficient. Ha'ara really has to be something, but it's minimal. And we've gotten rid of, if we started, so if I was a good teacher, I would say to you, write down on a piece of paper only for yourselves, don't show it to anybody, what is bia that affects marriage. And you could very well have said, right, miruk. You could have said, ejaculation. That we got rid of as defining the effect. Then you might say the full glands coming into her, a gemar bia nahara, a gemar bia in which it's a full, and that is gotten rid of. They also get rid of, according to this, and it seems to be it also gets rid of nishika. So now we have, so now in terms of what does it is Gemar Ha'ara does it. Of course, a full, everything else, if you add it on to it, could also do it. But it just needs to be an act which is, how can I say, definitional. On the trial, the lawyer can say, she can say to the woman who's on trial as a whatever way the trial's going, did the Rosh Hatara enter you? And she can answer. I say that's the purpose, but that's what happens. It becomes a fully understandable. Okay, comments? Lexi?
I'm wondering how this relates. I mean, I guess again, kind of to what Joel was saying, but how this relates to our notion of Be'ula and Betulim, that we obviously also in various cases talk about a woman being a Betula, and they obviously, anatomically incorrectly think that an intact hymen / whatever has to do with being a Betula. And Ha'ara, if we define that as just entering the corona, is unlikely to, again, you don't even puncture a hymen, but is unlikely to do whatever it is people call puncturing a hymen and produce blood. So I'm wondering how that relates to our idea of what it means to for someone to become not a virgin by this, because we often relate to it vis-a-vis the hymen, and Ha'ara is most likely not going to impact the hymen.
This, I think, this is a great discussion. I mean, we just as the rabbis, about to say, I don't know where I'm going, but I don't know where I'm going, but just as the rabbis created a structure with money, which is create any kind of structure with money. They decided on a certain structure to create money. And it's even, and just like they made a structure with a star, being, so there are two, the party of the first part and the party of the second part, it's all this. They've come up with a sexual definition, which doesn't answer all our questions. I think the only question it's trying to answer here is the Bula situation with the Kohen Gadol. I agree with you, but it's like the Bula situation doesn't make any difference for anybody else except for a Kohen Gadol. I mean, the Gemara brings us
like this isn't there isn't enough kamina for this for Kiddushin. I'm just like curious about that.
No, so I'm saying it had, but what is now? I mean, have you had sex and are you kona? And this is what is there a kinyan been made? And this is the question that it answers. When is a kinyan made? I had yes, Your Honor, I had sex with her, but I did not ejaculate. That's not what I'm asking you, the judge says. That's not what we're ascertaining.
I mean, it could make a difference for ketubah too, though, right?
Why?
Where 400 versus 200 is, right? If
This is after all that's been done.
No, I'm saying that there was like an interaction with another man, right? It was just neshika, right? Or that could make that difference in that.
Yeah, no. But they didn't haven't brought that question.
Right, or even like Motzi Shemra, that like somebody could be like Be'ula, if we consider somebody who there is Nishika to be Be'ula, she could be Be'ula, as in like she could be not a virgin by that form and still bleed. I mean, also whatever, you can still bleed even if you've had full sex before, but that's another discussion. They don't seem to like think that's the truth. But like even according to the world the rabbis are living in, like by that definition, you could have like had sex vis-a-vis Nishika and then still have like a intact hymen.
Okay, let's leave it. Let's leave it there. Let's leave it there. I wanted to do Lamed Gimel because I have to finally start talking about these things somehow. So this is where it is. Now, come with me to Isurei Bia, Rambam, Isurei Bia Aleph. We'll look at Yud and Yud Aleph quickly. Okay. And Ruben, you can read. Okay, do you have it? Perak Aleph, Isurei Bia,
One
Perak
second, I'm
Aleph,
trying to find it.
Kedusha, Hilchos Isurei Bia, Perak Aleph, Halacha Yud.
Is it in the source you sent us? Okay, Perek Aleph Halacha Yud. Okay, let me just make sure that I got the right one.
First word is
Oh.
Hamachnis.
המכניס ראש התרה בלבד, הוא הנקחה מהרע. מלשון
Yeah, stop. By the way, where are you putting the comma?
מכניס ראש התרה בלבד, הוא הנקחה מהרע.
All right.
So the one that enters just the corona exclusively, הוא הנקחה מהרע, is the one that's called מהרע. מלשון את מקור הרע comes from the language of את מקור הרע. מכניס כל העבר הוא הנקחה גומר. And the one that inserts the whole the penis, I guess, הוא הנקחה גומר. Is that's called גמר ביה.
So Ha'ara stops where?
So it stops at the corona.
Yeah,
that's where
I
Ha'ara
think it
stops.
also begins with the corona. It's kind of a trick question. It also begins with the corona because that's all it is. It's only that point. That's Ha'ara, according to Rambam, I think. V'chol,
וכל הביות האסורות, אחד המערער ואחד הגומר. And all the biyot that are prohibited is the one that has Hamarer v'echad hagomer. It's the one that goes through the whole range of Bia, basically.
No, it's either Ma'areh
Oh,
or
okay.
Gomer. Either or. I'm just translating it brutally, right? It's binary here, right? It's either Ma'areh or it's Gomer. Either one of that is the Machnis. Let's say call Ever Huanikra Gomer B'chol Biot Asurot have their impact. I'm sorry. Whether this Ma'areh or whether it's Gomer, meaning in both cases it has the impact. The Alpal P.
So the Rambam is saying that as far as the Isur is concerned, there is no difference between
Right. That's what
Ma'areh and
that's how I
Gomer.
read it. That's how I read it. The Alpal P.
ואף על פי שלא הוציא שכבת זרע. And like it doesn't matter whether there was like an ejaculation or not. ואף על פי שפירש ולא גמר, and ואף על פי שפירש ולא גמר. And that's also in a case where, how would you translate piresh?
In other words, so Lo Gomar.
Oh, right.
What does
So
Gomar here mean?
Gomar means that
That's
inserted the
Machnis
whole.
Al HaEzer.
Right.
So why does he need this line here? It's an emphasis.
You think
to
that
tell
like
us-
ejaculation is not real, like it's not what we're talking about here. It's not the main element.
No, but the point is that it doesn't matter if this is a full sexual act that affects Kenyan. You might think it only works when it's a process leading to Gemira, right?
Right.
And what's Gemira? Gemira is insertion of the complete complete Aver, of the complete member. But no, Bafal P, Shaperash, below Gomer. Kavan, there shouldn't be a period there. Should go on. Kavan.
עד שהכניס ראש העטרה, נתחייבו שניהם מיתת בית דין, או כרת, או מלכות, או מכת מלכות. Basically, he's saying that it's enough that you have a me'ara, be mechayav, or whatever the punishment is.
Ve'echad.
ואחד הבא על הערווה, דרכה, ואחד הבא עליה שלא כדרכה, מהשיר הבא, like I have to like make my screen open. מי שיהיה הרבה, התחייבו שניהם מיתת, או כרת, או מלכות, או מכת מלכות. בין שהיו שוכבים, בין שהיו עומדים, על הכנסת.
Yeah, I like this one. Beishu Shofim, Beishu Omvid. That's these, get rid of conventional thought. Okay? Al.
על הכנסת, העטרה הוא החיוב.
He's nailing this down, right? The chiyuv is hachnasat ha'atara, which is the language we said before of sof, right? Sof ha'ara. Or gemar ha'ara. That is where the chiyuv is.
But that's because you can't do.
What's interesting is that there is no difference between Gemara and Atchalat Hara. He's putting everything in the same.
No,
the same
there's no difference between what?
Gemara, there is no difference between the beginning and the end of Hara, right? Hara begins and ends with the insertion of
right,
Corona.
exactly. I said that too, right? It begins and ends with hachnasat, the hachnasa of the Atara. Yud Aleph.
I think I interrupted Gershon earlier.
Gershon, please read Yud Aleph.
Okay. כל הבא ביאה אסורה בלא קישוי, אלה שהיה עבר שלו מדולדל, כמו עבר המתים, כגון חולים או מי שנולד כך, כגון סריס,
סריס חמה basically means he had a, he was born that way, he had a condition, he had a syndrome.
אף על פי שהכניס את העבר בידו, אינו חייב לא כרת ולא מלכות, ואין צריך לומר מיתה, שאין זו ביאה. אבל פוסק הוא מן התרומה ובית דין מכין את שניהם מכת מלכות.
Yeah, all right. The psul from the truma, because that's a kohen din. That that she becomes psula from the truma that she eats from a kohen because there was a sexual act, so it's kind of it's a knas. And the Beit Din can, beat them up because Beit Din's really upset with them because they're doing the acts, which if there was kishui, if there was erection and hardness, would lead to all sorts of punishments. So the Beit Din may give them makat mardu. But I added Yud Aleph here is that Hachnasat Torah, it has to be, like I say, the Torah has to be alive. The Torah can't be dead, and that constitutes an act of bia kolba bia asura asura below kishu el shaya aver shel meduach with kagon lacholim da 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 afal pishich nisa aver biyado ein lachayab lo person bein serachum or mitzvah she'ein zo bia. That's the line I was looking for. That's not considered bia. Now we have a definition of bia. We have a definition of ha'ora. We have our definitions here. Any comments in terms of the Rambam? Okay. Please go
I would guess
to.
for the Rambam, like Bia is like, it doesn't matter what it is. Hara, Kumar, Bia, it's all considered the same, right?
Right. Let's go to Rabbeinu.
Wait.
I hear you. Let's go Rabbeinu Asher on Kiddushin, on HaEzer Niknas Perek Rishon Kiddushin, what we were looking at. On Daf Yud. Okay, he begins where it says Daf Yud. This is a halacha tetzayin of the Rosh. He begins with repeating about the boilahu tichos bia kona osot bia kona. He continues with that. So then he says, the kibul kiddushin achar omar ameimar meishmei derava kol habal da'ato agamar bia. We kind of forgot all that about gamar bia. We went to like a whole, just hearing him repeat this. The dafna kishagamar biato on the gamar bia. Az reading da'ato agamar bia. The imkodem gamar bia. Kibla kiddushin me'achar mekudeshes l'sheni. Aval im ha'arav. Okay, stop. This brings us back. The Rosh says we still have the notion of das, and the das here, of course, he says Gemar Bia. We don't know what Gemar Bia necessarily means for him, but you have to have the das on Gemar Bia. Aval im, no, Gemar Bia here seems to mean Gemar Bia, not Gemar Ha'ara. Excuse me, it's Gemar Bia. Right? He's different. He doesn't seem to be agreeing with Rabbeinu Tam. He doesn't seem to be agreeing with the Bali Tosfos. He, who is at the end of the Bali Tosfos, as it were, he's not a Tosfos per se, but he's at the end. He is reading it how we read it at the beginning. Because his act of stopping during the ha'ara shows that's what he wanted to do. And that was his kavanah. And therefore she's mekudeshes. V'chein, even, and I'll add the words even better, but v'chein, im kodem bia omar, ani roseh shetit kadesh. By the way, he's saying this to her. We had that question before. Of course. If he's giving her a ring, he has to say, if he's doing it through Bia, of course he has to say it to her. And of course she has to agree to it. Here it seems, the way he says it here seems evident. I want you to be Mekudeshet Bahara. I'm going to do Hara. Mekudeshet, she is.
He's not against all the Tosfot. He's specifically against Rabbeinu Tam, who is sort of most of the Tosfot. He's more in line.
You're right. You're right. But it's Rabbeinu Tam. You're right. I apologize. You're right. So you're right. The Isha Niknas V'Hara, the Alfin Ticha Ticha, the Arayotim. He leaves it at that. Now I want to say one more thing. If you see where I underlined, in the next paragraph. We don't have time. The halacha gabai b'rava we're asking the question: is it making everson or nesuin, which we really haven't discussed. But Rava the ba'u lemif shots mehai masisin they receive osa. After the dochil who Gemara never proves. Nobody in the Gemara fully proves that hara. I'm sorry, that Bia makes everything or kedushin. But I forgot the dochil who Gemara shot the masisin kavisayu that because it's kedushin. By three ways is kedushin affected. Our first Mishnah, mashma the two mighty bright to Rabbi Yochanan ben Bagbag, and this is not the Pirkei Avos quote. Lemivshat nesuin osad. There is one group who wants to actually say it makes nesuin. But Dochel Rav Nachman and Ravina got on Dilon Erusin osad. The Hilchosah Kavasayu. In other words, the Gemara itself never fully proves that it's Erusin. That certainly doesn't get off the ground on the suing, and that's where it is. But this ambiguity might explain what we saw earlier on. The Shita to say that Ha'ara is important for what? Ha'ara is important for the state after Kiddushin to affect Nisuin. That would seem to go like the Ben Bagbag, I think. Okay, one more thing to see, or two more things to see. You have the Mordechai. I'll skip the Mordechai. Go to we'll do one little section of the Ran. It's Ta'isha Nikne Sper Rishon and Kedushin, Rabbeinu Nisim. Yeah. You see where it says, do you have this? Do you have
Which
this
page? Which page in Rabbeinu Nisim?
Which page? It says Yudalad on the top of the page. Yeah, on the right. Rabbeinu Nisim, Ha'isha Niknis Perak Rishon Kiddushin. There's a very important paragraph here. The Kasha Rav Alfasi. Joel, do you have that? Okay, you have that. Prepare Kabbalah, you've to the Hasan and reading Isha Nikni Globala Bahara, the Gamrian Kicha Meyavama, the Teretz Zelashana, Sham, the Hatam Bibia Shala Achar Kiddushin, what we talked about earlier. Well, Inyan Shatea said Nisua, and why does that make her Nisua? The Kaven Shikavar Hiknuya. The big thing has been done, which is Kedushin, which is Erison. She's already Kinuya. Bia Kolduhu Gomeritba. And Ha'ara could be considered Bia Kolduhu. Abahacha Bia de Kedushin asking, but we talk about Bia to make Kedushin itself. Omishum de Chilas Kinyan, who is the beginning of making a Kinyan. Mafkinan de Be'inan Gemar Bia Baskinan. You have to say there was a Gemar Bia. This is a different sheet. You have to say there's a Gemar Bia. Okay, we'll leave it here. We still have to go, we have to see the Shulchan Aruch and all that. But also, the next thing I want to do is, and I gave you a list, is the stuff on from the Gemara. There's some more things that are available in Nisim I'll come back to. But the Gemara Gittin, which Hamagarish is Ishto, and they were together in a Pundak. What can we assume and what can we not assume? What are the assumptions? It's a very important section. And look at that. There are a number of Rambams that we'll take a look at. You have the list, and then we'll finish it up. Okay, thank you very much. And
Thank you.
Shikoff on you, Rav.
Yeah. also, I would
Thank you so
say,
much.
don't pass in any halacha from tonight yet. Give this like another week, to
If the
absorb it.
occasion does arise
But-
this week, I will give you a call.
So you're saying I have to delete my Facebook posts? Okay.
I would say,